You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the Sound Money Show from Casey Research with me, your host, Andy Duncan. It's my great pleasure today to be speaking to James Altucher, who is the Managing Director of Formula Capital, founder of Stock Picker, and writer of the seminal blog, Altucher Confidential. He's also the author of the special book, Choose Yourself, Be Happy, Make Millions, and Live the Dream. Today we'll be talking about that book, Bitcoin, Fed tapering, and how to do a Madonna and reinvent yourself. Hello, James.
Hey, Andy, thanks a lot for having me on the show.
Our pleasure. Now, in June this year, you were the first person to sell a book only available for purchase in Bitcoin, though we can now get the book on Amazon for old-fashioned paper fiat money. We've also seen Bitcoin recently head towards the gold price going over $1,000 in what could either be a huge parabola or something that could be here to stay. Now, I've got two first questions for you. Did you sell many books for Bitcoins in June? And what's your outlook on this monetary phenomenon?
Yeah, so I pre-released the book for Bitcoin only about a month before I released it on Amazon, and I sold several hundred copies. I actually was probably, and still probably am, the best-selling Bitcoin-only author ever. And it's funny because I could see some of the email addresses as the transactions were coming through, and some people from Amazon were actually buying my book using Bitcoin. So it was interesting. So and I've fortunately held on to those Bitcoins, so it's been a good thing.
And what was the dollar price for those Bitcoins when you got them?
Well, I was selling the book for 0.1 Bitcoins each, which at the time was about $10. 0.1 Bitcoins. Bitcoin itself was about 100, and now Bitcoin, so it's between 1,000 and 1,100.
And what's your general outlook then on this monetary phenomenon?
Well, the idea of a cryptocurrency, a currency that has baked-in functionality to it, is very important and critical. Why is it critical? It's because we're seeing all across the world two conflicting things happening that is going to eventually break. We're seeing the global economy try to trade, around the world, by breaking down barriers. But we're seeing a huge barrier, which is that central banks are trying to be stronger than ever to protect their currencies. So that can't continue. Either the global economy is going to win or the central banks are going to win. And, what's going to end up happening is that at some point the global economy is going to win. So some central bank will collapse, causing a currency to weaken enough that the citizens of that country will say, you know what, we need a better, more global currency that solves some of the problems that were caused by the central bank that we had. And they will switch to either Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, and that will be the rise of not only that country's economy, but the rise of whatever cryptocurrency they choose, or the entire basket of cryptocurrencies. I should mention that not only do I own some Bitcoins, but I own several alternative currencies, although Bitcoin is, of course, the winning cryptocurrency at the moment.
Do you think, though, that we could go back to an older form of money, such as gold or silver, or do you just see the cryptocurrencies being the only way ahead?
I see cryptocurrency being the only way ahead, and I'll tell you why. Gold was traditionally a store of value when there were no fiat currencies. But Bitcoin is not just a currency. Bitcoin is, you can view it as a program containing a set of functionalities. So part of that functionality is that it's encrypted and secure. Part of that functionality is that it's peer-to-peer. Part of that functionality is that it's very easy to store and to transfer. So these are things that no fiat currency has and no traditional store value such as gold has. So it's very different from a currency in the traditional sense in that it actually has functionality. A Bitcoin is not a coin. It's a very complicated set of programs that allow you to do many, many things other than just change money. Bitcoins can be used for any type of secure transaction, like an escrow agreement or any kind of contractual agreement. I actually think that the rise of Bitcoin is going to wipe out the legal profession to some extent, at least the part that deals with contract law. So Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies contain a much larger store of value inside of them just by the sheer programming and functionality that they offer.
You mentioned several other kind of coin systems there. We've got Litecoin and Ripple and a few others. Do you think Bitcoin, because the transactions can be tracked, do you think it has to be changed in the future so it's completely kind of untraceable who's got the Bitcoins? Or will Bitcoin itself just continue and the network effect will make it the big one?
Well, the network effect is already making it the big one. I mean, it's gone from nothing to, as high as, I think, $1,280. But, the fact that every transaction block contains all the transactions that have ever occurred, I don't know if that's going to make it so big at some point it's going to be too large to handle. It does not have the security concerns you mentioned because there are many, many ways to overcome. Even though it tracks every transaction, the transactions are hidden by what your public keys are, and you could generate many public keys for yourself. No one can trace a transaction back to you. So, in most situations where there's a Bitcoin transaction, there's no security concerns, as opposed to a normal credit card transaction, which has enormous security issues. The bank knows what you did, the government knows what you did, the store knows what you did and who you are. So in almost 100% of current transactions with currencies, there's security issues. But with Bitcoin, there's not really security issues. I mean, Bitcoin does have some technical issues that are theoretical more than reality. For instance, if someone controls 51% of all the Bitcoins, they can potentially steal Bitcoins for themselves or make extra transactions. But that, in reality, is not going to happen. So, but of course, we'll see in the future. Now, some of these other currencies solve some of these issues, and I think that's why the basket of currencies will continue to thrive.
Now, I want to get onto the Federal Reserve, but I just got one more question on Bitcoin for you. Just in the kind of current time, it's got this massive price rise to over $1,000. Do you think that it's currently being hampered by speculators who are buying it to hoard it? And is that stopping its use as a currency? And if you think that's happening, do you think that could be a permanent effect, or will that just go away in the fullness of time?
You make a really great point, which is also a really great opportunity, as most great points are. So who is curious about Bitcoin right now? Well, technology people are curious because it's so advanced from a technological perspective. Libertarians are curious about it because it doesn't require a Federal Reserve Bank in the middle, which is amazing. Like if you buy a product in China, I don't need to go through all central bank operations, through my Federal Reserve, through China's central bank, and so on. So that's amazing. And day traders are interested in it because they're trading it and hoarding it, even though there's no way of knowing, they have no way of predicting future value of Bitcoin. So those are the three primary people that are interested. I do think there is a need in the marketplace to develop easier merchant services so that merchants can accept Bitcoins as currency. And there are a few companies in the space, but I think we're not even in the first inning of companies that can make Bitcoins easy for the regular person on the street to use. For instance, making a Bitcoin debit card. There's maybe one or two examples, but there should be more thought into this. And so that's going to happen.
Now, moving on to one of these old-fashioned central banks, we like contrarians on the Sound Money Show. You've said in the past that if the Fed actually tapers, that markets should go up, which goes against conventional wisdom. Can you explain your thinking on this? And do you think that Janet Yellen will actually manage to taper or even possibly end the money printing known as quantitative easing, or will she be unable to do so because everyone's so addicted to cheap, free paper money?
I think that's a good question, and I think she was picked simply because she thinks like Bernanke. She'll keep printing as long as there is the slightest hint that printing money is preventing the next Great Depression. She is scared to death that the Great Depression, 2.0 will happen on her watch. So she'll keep printing as long as possible. But there is evidence, and this is just statistical evidence. If you go back to every time the Fed has ended its tapering, the market has gone up, at least for the year after the tapering ended. Why does that happen? Is because the Fed became confident enough that the economy was growing faster than it could handle, and it stopped the tapering. And so when the government is growing faster than inflation, then we all feel flush, we all feel rich, we buy stocks, companies have higher profit margins than ever, and the stock market goes up and everyone feels good for a while. Eventually that ends as money tightens and people hold on to their money in the bank, but we're a long way, we're at 0% right now. So why would anyone keep their money in the bank when they could, just splurge and keep spending all this free money? It's like money is free for us at the moment. So, it'll be a long wave of tightening before money actually stops flowing into the system. We started tapering when interest rates were around like 4 or 5% or more. I mean, we started printing, when interest rates were that high. It's going to be a long way back to get interest rates back up to that point again.
Now, at the top of the program, you said a central bank would fail and go bust and maybe move on to a cryptocurrency instead. Do you think that could be the Federal Reserve, or will that be the last one? And if you don't think it's the Federal Reserve, do you have a side bet on which central bank you think will be the first to fail?
Yeah, I think we've seen evidence of this. Whenever one of the European countries has had problems, two things have happened. One, the price of Bitcoin has surged. Like take Cyprus, for instance, tiny little country. I couldn't even point to Cyprus on a map, to be honest. And I think of myself as educated, but I'm clearly not. But when Cyprus was having problems with their currency, Bitcoin prices spiked from about, 20 to 120, and the dollar strengthened. So the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Federal Reserve, will be the last one to collapse, but it will be at some point a potential chain of dominoes. I do think, though, Argentina, and I've been to Argentina many times. I know Doug Casey lives there. Argentina is a great, beautiful country with an amazing culture. They are doing horrible things to their currency. Already, Argentinians are switching over to Bitcoins for some transactions, and I think Argentina is going to be the first currency to fall, where Bitcoin becomes the replacement. And I actually think then Argentina, which is one of the largest economies in the world, actually, at the turn of the century, I think it was number 2, the second largest, at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, it was the second largest economy in the world. I think Argentina will be the first to fall. And I think then everyone's going to start using Bitcoins, and Argentina will thrive, and Bitcoins will thrive.
I can't speak for Doug Casey, but I suspect he might be nodding his head with you if he's listening to this in Argentina. Now, moving on to your book.
Doug Casey had a great quote, which we quote in my house all the time. My wife's Argentinian. So Argentina, if you live there, you should leave. And if you're not from there, you should go there. And it's really true. And just in terms of currency, because we have a lot of family in Argentina, you cannot get money into or out of Argentina, which is the main problem that Bitcoin solves. And note, gold does not solve that. Silver does not solve that. Crinkly U.S. dollar paper does not solve that. Credit cards and banks do not solve that. Bitcoin solves that. And that's why cryptocurrencies are valuable.
Okay. Now, moving on to your book, Choose Yourself. In it, you outline how people can use all the latest technologies like WordPress and Facebook and so on to reinvent themselves, especially if they've fallen into some kind of career meltdown. Can you give our listeners a quick summary of how people can go about reinventing themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a deeper issue, which is that we're really talking about Plan B for the middle class. Plan A happened over the last 100 years, which is that the middle class thrived in this era of corporatism, where all the major corporations in the Fortune 500 grew up and hired tens of thousands of employees and kept this mythology of safety. So that everybody thought, I'm going to have my retirement, my 401k, my IRA, everything's going to protect me. Well, now that is just, that period is over. The corporations are all firing people left and right. They're replacing them with temp workers. This is not something that's necessarily, good or bad. There's no judgment. It's just happening. This is what's happening across all over, not only the U.S., but all over the world. You're seeing this in a dramatic rise in temp workers. I'm even on the board of a staffing company with $1 billion in revenues. I put my money where my beliefs are. And so what I'm seeing is many people need help because they find that their mythology of safety that they grew up with, whether it was education or, belief in the safety of a corporate life or whatever, these beliefs have gone away and they have to change their beliefs. The way you change your belief is by reinventing yourself. And that's what people are going to have to do. It's not like a choice. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to stay in my cubicle job. The cubicle jobs are going away. The New York City office buildings are emptying out. So the way, and I've had to go through this myself. I've gone dead broke, bankrupt, several times after having millions, selling businesses, and I've had to come back again and again and again. And I've sort of figured out what it is that I'm doing on the way up that's good and what it is I'm doing on the way down that's bad. And I'll tell you, it sounds kind of corny, but in order to reinvent yourself, you have to start by taking a big step back and saying, okay, am I doing the things that are getting me physical health, like eating well, sleeping well, exercising? Am I doing the things that are giving me emotional health? For instance, being around people who love me, being around people who inspire me, and being around people who I respect. Am I doing the things that give myself mental health? So am I coming up with ideas every day, either for myself or for my friends or for other businesses I'm involved with or other businesses that I could potentially offer value to? So the key in reinvention is being able to offer value to others that they did not expect to receive. And then finally, am I working on my spiritual health? And I don't mean in some religious way. I mean simply, am I grateful for what I have? Do I feel the abundance in my life? And am I willing to surrender the result if I do the best that I can at each moment? If you focus on those four things, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health, it's what I call the daily practice, but it's a moment-by-moment practice. That's the key to reinvention, and that's how you reinvent yourself, and I discuss that in the book, Choose Yourself.
Well, you've been a great personal inspiration to me. I self-published my own first novel under a pen name, sort of Marathon, because of your inspiration. And you also got me into podcasting as well a couple of years ago, so that's good. So I'd like you to thank you for that. Now, it's been fantastic It's been fantastic speaking with you today. How can our listeners find out more about your work?
Well, I strongly recommend they buy and read my book, Choose Yourself, on Amazon. And you can also find my blog post at jamesaltucher.com. And I also write more on my email list. So some things that don't appear on my blog appear on my email list, which you could sign up for on my blog.
Thank you very much for your time today, James Altucher.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks.
You can subscribe to Sound Money on iTunes or sign up to our podcast at Casey Research, where we'd also welcome your feedback. I'd like to thank James Altucher for joining us today, and I'd like to thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please let all your friends know all about us to help us grow this podcast. Meanwhile, and until next time, goodbye.